Welcome, League members, and thank you for being here today. It's an honor to be here and serve my last day as League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson president. And it's wonderful to see a room full of great members and those who've dedicated their time to a great organization. Before we begin, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement statement. We respectfully acknowledge that the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson is on land and territories of indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the Tohono O'odham and the Pasquayaqui people. We also humbly acknowledge that for most of its history, our organization has not been welcoming to women of color. To quote our CEO of the League of Women Voters, U.S., Virginia Casey Solomon, even during the Civil Rights Movement, the League was not as present as we should have been, while activists risked life and limb to register Black voters in the South. The League's work and our leaders were later joining to help protect all voters at the polls. It wasn't until 1966 that we reached our first position to combat discrimination. Still, our focus on social policy was from afar, not on the front lines, and African Americans were shut out of the vision of the League. Today, we invite all people, regardless of gender identity, ability, ethnicity, or race, to join us as we commit to righting the wrongs of our past and building a stronger and more inclusive democracy. Thank you. We will begin with our credentialing, and Madam Membership Chair, do we have a quorum present?
Yes, we do. We've got 51 members here, and that's a quorum. That's well over 10%.
Okay, thank you. The next order of business is the appointment of our annual meeting officers. Our parliamentarian, Kate Stewart, timekeeper, Sue DeArmond, minutes committee, Kathleen Edelman and Joan Caltas. Are there any objections to the appointments? Seeing that there are no objections, the appointments are approved by general consent. Thank you. The next order of business today is the adoption of the meeting rules, which can be found on pages 4 and 5 of the call. Now, depending on where you printed the call from, sometimes the pages may be a little bit off, so it could be 4 and 5, or it may be 5 and 6. We ask that you also take note of rule number 5. All motions must be sent in writing to the secretary. Can I have a motion from the floor to adopt the rules?
I don't understand. Who makes the motion?
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the rules as submitted in the call to 2024 for the annual meeting. Is there a second?
Susan Black says.
Okay, thank you. Any objections? Okay. The meeting minutes are adopted by general consent. We move on next to our treasurer's report. Pat Tapke. Pardon? Oh, sorry. I think I'm jumping a little bit ahead of myself. So we want to go ahead and approve the meeting minutes from 2023. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the 2023 League of Women Voters Greater Tucson annual meeting as submitted to the call in 2024 at this annual meeting? And those can be found on pages 5 and 11. Do we have a motion from the floor to approve the minutes? Pardon? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Who's second? Teresa.
No. Any objections? The meeting minutes are adopted by general consent. Thank you. Pat Tapke. So we have our treasurer's report.
This is the operations financial report as of March 31st, 2024. That would be for the period July 1, 2023 through March 31st, 2024. Our fiscal year ends on June 30th, but this was obviously the latest figures we have. The operations, I'll just remind you, is the account that we're a 501c4. It is a nonprofit, but not tax deductible. Your donations are not tax deductible because we cover things like all of the administrative expenses and advocacy and things like that. As far as the report is concerned, last year the budget deficit was to be $20,437. Right now, if you can do the mental math, the difference between $55,000 in expenses and $39,952 in receipts is a negative $15,000. However, we've had some problems with Club Express renewing memberships, and so a lot of the memberships got delayed until April. I just did the numbers for April last night, and we have about $10,000 in receipts for April, and I think there will be additional receipts in May and June. So the number isn't going to be quite as bad as it seems like it might be there. The other thing is I think we may have one more donation coming for Issues and Eggs, so that will help out a lot. So are there any questions about the operating financial statement? Sir.
Why is there a delay in the revenue from the membership?
We had a problem with Club Express, the way they set up the renewal this year. A lot of people did not understand. They sent out an email saying that it was automatic, and everybody thought the payment would be automatic too, and it wasn't. And so we had to follow up with, Judy Wood has been hours and hours and hours following up with people saying, you know, and walking them through. The other thing is the process wasn't that easy this year. So just 1 year thing, yeah. Mm-hmm. We normally get our dues in. Now, next year it'll be different because they are changing the dues structure. But for this year, it just was, we normally get, I think, I'm new here, but I think years ago, everybody renewed in the spring. So, you know, a good portion of our members renew in the spring, and that's what happened. Any other questions? Kathy's asking, with the revised due structure, are we anticipating breaking even? Kathy, if it's okay with you, we're going to cover that a little bit in the budget, okay? And that's the next thing on the agenda, so, okay? Okay. Then let's go to the next slide for the Education Fund. The Education Fund is pretty straightforward. The Education Fund is our tax deductible. If you make the, let me just say, I know I'm talking to the choir here, but if you make a donation to the Ed Fund, please be sure to put Greater Tucson Ed Fund on the check. The new treasurer at the Ed Fund is being very, very careful about this, and if it doesn't say Greater Tucson, she wants to put it in Arizona. So we have to go back and get people to email and say, yes, I meant this for Greater Tucson. So it looks like we would have a deficit of about $3,000 there. We budgeted a deficit of about $8,700. We've got some expenses still to be paid in April and May. I expect that the deficit is going to be around $6,000. But we do have, let's go to the next slide. Are there any questions about the Ed Fund financial statement? Okay, let's go to the next slide then. And this is our financial position. And you'll see that for 2024, the operations end has about $46,000 and the Ed Fund has about $48,000. That's a surplus of $94,000 plus, I think, you know, the $10,000 that I'm expecting or that I know is in for dues. So this is we have years when we will be spending more money than we take in, and that's what the surplus is for. So we are just kind of gearing up right now for a very important year, and we do. I'll discuss it when I talk about the budget, but we do have the financial resources. The fact that we're going to be a little bit behind in both the operations and the ed fund this year, we have the money to cover it. So, are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately, Ann Davis is out of town, and so Pat Tapke, who also serves on the committee, will assume the leadership for the committee. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Victor. The Budget Committee was comprised of Ann Davis, the chairperson, myself as treasurer, Victor and Emily Bridson, and Dorian Dodson, and Bob Delaney. And I thank all of them for really, really hard work in a very difficult. We're anticipating a really active year, and it was a really thoughtful and good budget process. The operations budget is showing an anticipated deficit of about $24,870. There's three big reasons for this. We're having a change in the due structure. It was voted at the last, I think, convention that the dues will, starting in February 1st, 2025, our dues payments will go directly to League of Women Voters US, and then they will give a portion to the state and a portion to the local leagues. The portion that's coming to the local leagues is about 20%, and it's going to be a decrease from what we've had in the past. At the same time, when we got in the previous way that the dues was done is we would get the dues and then we would make a payment to Arizona of a certain percent and a payment to National of a certain percent, and that was called a per member payment. The per member payment is going, because of the timing of this thing, the per member payment is going to continue. We're going to have a per member payment we've already made it in 2020, we've made it in 2024. We'll have to make that in 2025, but we're going to be getting less money in. So it's going to make things a little tight. The other thing is, with the year that we're anticipating, a lot of the chair people, the committee chairs want to do a good job, a great job this year, and they've just got some wonderful ideas and great things going on, and it's going to cost. And then the final thing is, at the bottom of the budget is we've added a contingency fund. We ran into last year. We added a youth committee. When we did our strategic planning, we decided that we wanted to get more youth involved, but we did not have that in the budget. We had not thought about that in April when we approved the budget, and in July when we decided to do this, we didn't have any funds to give to the youth committee. So there wasn't anything in the bylaws that allowed that, and we are going to change the bylaws, but we also have added a contingency fund in the budget for things like that, and for if something came up that we could get involved in and it would cost a little extra money and it's not in the budget, that's the kind of thing that we'll have in the contingency fund. So for those reasons, we are showing a larger deficit than normal. I think we have we have approximately $100,000 in surplus funds. We have looked at this very carefully and looked at our overhead expenses that we would have if we didn't have any money coming in. What would we have to pay out? And we feel that even with the deficit, and I'll get onto the Ed Fund budget in a minute, there's a deficit there also, but even with the deficit that we're anticipating for next year, we would have enough money left over to pay our overhead expenses and some expenses for fundraising that we would need to get things back on track for a year. I went on to the Generally Accepted Accounting Practices website, and I went on to the League of Women Voters US website. Both of them recommend that you have a surplus or cash reserves to cover 3 months' expenses. I think we would be okay for a year with paying the rent and paying the utilities and paying the electric bill and the internet and things like that. So although I'm asking for approval of a larger than normal deficit, I do think that fiscally we are on good ground. So are there any questions about the budget? Kathy, have I answered your question?
I'm sorry, I have a hearing consultation next week.
Obviously, I can't guarantee that, but we have spent a lot of time looking at this, and I do feel that we're in good shape, and that we're not wildly, spending money, and I have to tell you, from working with all the chair people on all the committees, they are outstanding. We have got some really wonderful people, and I think our money is in good hands. I really do. So if there's no questions on the operations budget, I'm sorry. Emily.
What percent can you tell us that our fundraiser raises process like?
Issues and eggs brought in on the financial report, it says $24,696. There's at least another $1,500 that came in this month and is going to the Ed Fund. So the issues and eggs raised, let me do the math, $26,000. Expenses for issues and eggs were about $16,000. So we made $10,000 basically on that, and we're anticipating that in the budget next year. Plus, I think the other thing that we've put in the budget is we hope to do a second fundraiser that would bring in maybe not 10,000, but something like that.
I was asking if issues and eggs, what percent of the budget does it get us every year? And is there every year, does it increase, or is it like 50%, a third that we raise from that? And if we're very dependent. Now, you mentioned a second fundraiser, but not what it would be. But issues and eggs, as I understand it, is the primary one beyond the members.
It certainly is our primary fundraiser. Most of our money comes from dues.
From membership, okay.
Yeah, I think we have, I'm looking at the budget this year, and it's hard to say because we've accounted for the fact that we're going to have lower dues this year. It normally would be, I think, we normally figure 27 to 30,000 in dues, and so 16,000 would be the fundraiser. We normally have maybe another 10,000 in contributions from members. The holiday brunch usually brings in about $1,000, maybe $1,500. $1,000 to the operations and $1,000 to Ed Fund. So a lot of people at the holiday brunch will make the checks out to the Ed Fund because it's close to the end of the year and they're thinking about taxes. Have I answered your question, or have I confused you?
Oh, what's that?
It varies.
Oh, it varies. So each year, particularly issues in eggs, there's more some year than there is another. So there's not any set, baseline.
No, and the last 5 years or the last 4 years, it was done online. So there
Yeah,
it was,
I know, because of COVID, yeah.
It was probably a little bit less. I've only been here 2 years, so I think it was around $6,000 that we raised in 2023. Yeah, 2023, and about $10,000 that we raised in person. So, and we're anticipating that it would be another $10,000 for this coming year. And that is probably, I would say that's 20%, 20 or 25% of what we bring in.
Okay.
Okay?
That answers it for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
For issues in eggs, just as an example, from donations in the raffle we conducted, we raised $896. And our committee from Issues in Eggs, we felt the raffle was a last-minute throw-in. So we know we're going to be able to double that, come next year, because we're going to put a more concerted effort into that. So
And
that's
there's
just an example. $896, and the raffle was a throw-in.
Exactly. And there's one thing that I did forget to say, and that is that we are going to get a fundraising committee, an actual committee together to work on fundraising projects. I don't have anything in mind yet, a raffle or, a second event but I think we've got, some really great people. Anybody interested in being on that committee, please email me. I'm going to be out of town until May 7th, but I might not be able to answer your email while I'm gone. I'm staying with my brother who lives in a rural area of Ohio. So internet is sketchy, but I will get back to you by mid-May. If anybody's interested in being on the fundraising committee, I would really, really appreciate having the help. I think Emily said that she would help with that, and so, we're definitely going to we're getting things together, and Emily, if you want to join, we'd love to have you, okay? So she thought it was about 11,000, okay. Yeah.
Pat,
right.
the question I have has to do with the Jewish Community Foundation. And I haven't seen, I looked on page 15, but I haven't seen the amount of distribution that we are expecting to see, unless I missed it somewhere up there.
It's on the contribution from the Jewish Community Foundation is on the Ed Fund. That goes to the Ed Fund. So if we could go to the next slide. Judy, do you think I should go ahead and okay. So all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. The Ed Fund budget, we're looking at a deficit of about $27,380. And again, that's we have just really bumped up some of the voter registration and Ready, Set, Vote and things that are going to be needed this year. The other reason why this budget looks a little bit worse than usual is we are allowed to have the Ed Fund pay some of our overhead expenses, and we have decided to move some of the overhead, the rent, a little bit of the rent. I think it is actually 50% of the rent, and 40% of the utilities. We worked out, just what we thought would be a good number to disperse. And we also have the contingency fund of about $6,000 here. And if you look at the top, I think the endowment distribution is $7,000. We received a wonderful, I can't come up with the word. Someone passed away and left us a nice Endowment, thank you. I can't come up with the word. And that, it is actually a house that's being sold. It is not sold yet, but when that house is sold, that money will go into the endowment fund, and the amount of money that will get paid from the endowment fund will go up substantially. So it's $7,000 right now. There's about, if you go back to a former league member. Bob Richardson?
Yeah.
Robert Richardson, if anybody knew. The endowment,
Not,
endowment
I don't know
fund.
if it was endowment fund, but it was, you said it was money that we could use in case for emergencies.
That's our surplus.
Okay,
That has been building up year after
Okay.
year.
What do we do with that money? Is it laying in a bank or is it being invested?
It is in the checking account. We have two checking accounts. We have a money market that has about $15,000 in it right now, and we have a certificate of deposit that has about $10,000, and that's paying 4.5%. It will be up July or August. I can't, and we're just going to keep renewing it as long as the CDs are paying nicely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Are the checking accounts interest paying?
No.
None of them are today. It's very hard.
And the money market is paying probably, I think, right around 1%, something like that, whatever your home savings account is paying. That's what it is. Okay. Okay, that covered the endowment. Are there any questions? And have I confused everybody? I hope not. Okay, any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then I would like a motion to approve the 2024-2025 education budget as approved by, and the board approved this already, and submitted in the call for 2024 meeting. Thank you. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. If anybody has any questions anywhere along the line, please see me after the meeting, email me, call me. Anytime you have a problem, let me know, okay? All right, bye-bye.
Thank you, Pat. And as you sit at your table and you look at the wonderful lavender flowers at your table, please thank Pat Tapke, who went out of her way in our last-minute flower debacle and being able to get the flowers. So we appreciate that, Pat. So please thank Pat Tapke. Yeah. We'll now move on to our bylaws revision with Kathleen Edelman. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so folks, please identify yourself when you do speak so that we know who's speaking. And you've been able to ramp it up a little bit. Okay, thank you. Okay. While we're waiting for Kathleen to come up, one of the things you'll notice is that I handed out a handout on the poll tax. So there should be one of those at each table. And it was interesting because as I spoke to people about it, a lot of people thought it was, they asked me if I created this, if this was a joke. And this is actually from the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. I had the opportunity to go a year ago to visit it. And this is real life. These are taken specifically from questions that folks were asked to be able to vote. And this, of course, if you don't even have a high school education, even if you have a college education, this is something that's going to deter you from voting, whenever, you're time comes to, and you look at the elections as a negative, something that creates a lot of fear. And when you have somebody asking you these questions, and typically they might be, close to a weapon or something, and they're asking you these questions, and they're not asking in the nicest way at all. And there's ramifications for even attempting to answer these questions. And I just look at number 3. You have to be an attorney, or you have to be well versed in Latin and a writ of certiorari. Typically you see that in legal briefs and whatnot, and subpoena ducis tecum. They don't even say that in court today. They just say a subpoena. But these are all means as intimidation. And there was a jar with jelly beans or peas or whatever, and you was again supposed to ask, but the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. I know Judy Wood's been able to go there. Muriel Brothwell's been able to go, and I think maybe someone else has. But Pam, yeah, okay, wow, okay. So we have several people that have definitely been able to go. So as part of my job at the YWCA, through my MacArthur grant, I was able to go for a learning exchange with several folks. So when you look at this is not a joke. This is real life. So again, but I don't want to take up your time. So Kathleen.
Okay, there were just 2 substantive changes to the bylaws this year. One, Article 5, Section 7, we established a process for the removal of a director or an officer. There was no process before that, and so we simply inserted a process, and I'll show you that. And then Article 8, Section 4, we edited the budget to allow for some of the flexibility that Pat Tapke was talking about that is needed. If something comes up that is budgeted, or an expense that is not budgeted, there needed to be a way to respond to that faster than just bringing it every year, which was the way that it was. So those were the 2 changes. So we'll skip forward to, for time purposes, feel free to read these either on the website or in your handout, because I think we're getting a little short of time. But it's just a due process for removal of a board member or an officer. And then the second one, the annual budget to be revised or amended by the board by an amount not to exceed 10% of the total budget amount. And these are in reference to items that were not budgeted but necessary to fund a new program or activity like the youth fund, to correct typos or errors in calculation. And then the final change, Article 9, we struck the description of meetings because we didn't really need that sentence anymore, in person, a hybrid, or the 2. Those are they. I would accept a motion to accept the bylaws. Do I have a second? And all agreed, in favor? Nays? Okay. All righty then.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. We'll move on next to the nominating committee report with Kathy Arrows and Judy Woods.
Hi. First, I want to say that this doesn't usually happen. It was really fun to be on the nominating committee. Sometimes it's difficult, but this was a very, very fun year. And Kathy and I filled in when there was a vacancy in the chair, and we had a great time. And I think I can speak for the rest of the committee on this. So we thank you for that. So we'll read the slate. President Emily Bridson, you want to stand? Okay, thank you. President-elect Betsy Boja, I don't think she's here. Secretary Barb Colvin. Program Chair Teresa Jenkins. Advocacy Chair Lovely Gonthier. Then we have directors who will serve a 2-year term. Bob Delaney, Isabel Giordis, Linda Longlet, and we have directors who will be serving for 1 year to fill vacancy. C.J. Jones, Grace Marie Thiesfeld. Okay. Then we elect the nominating committee chair, April Lewis. And the nominating committee, the elected people, Kathy Edelman and Nancy Norton. This is the slate. Thank you. Are there any nominations from the floor? Hearing none. None. I cast a motion that the slate be elected by unanimous consent.
I second that motion.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Judy and Kathy. Next up, we'll have our local program positions with Barbara Norander.
So as we did last year, we sent out a survey to the members asking them to respond to the local and the state issue positions. We got 39 responses, which is about what we had last year as well. You can see the numbers, all of them, the plurality is to retain the current positions, although the consolidated government, if you look at review and deletes, that's about the same. But otherwise, the results are to retain the current local league positions. And the survey also included the state of Arizona issue positions. Those also, the plurality was to retain those. Are there any questions? Okay. Do I have to ask for approval? Okay. Okay. I need someone to make a motion.
Motion for approval of the 2023-2024 local program positions that are presented in the call to 2024 annual meeting.
Okay.
So moved, Teresa Real.
Okay. A second? Okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Do we need to do one for, okay, we also need to do one for the state positions. So can I have a motion to approve the state position?
Nina Willis, I make a motion to approve.
Okay. A second?
Second. Make a motion.
Nina Willis. Okay. All in favor? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have our guest speaker that I'll introduce. And when I had to think of a guest speaker, I first thought of Laurice Walker. And I thought of Laurice Walker because I've had an opportunity to see her speak a few times. And I also know the role that she holds within the city is one that's vital and critical. And she's a sincere, dedicated, and loyal person to DEI and what it means, and tries to embody that every day. Laurice Walker was appointed as the City of Tucson's first Chief Equity Officer. She leads the Office of Equity and develops a comprehensive framework to advance equity in all aspects of city operations, which is a big endeavor here in Tucson. In addition, Laurice evaluates best practices in cities across the country and develops recommendations to address existing race and socioeconomic-based inequities in services and infrastructure delivery throughout Tucson. Quoting the Mayor, Regina Romero of Tucson, "This historic hire is symbolic of Mayor and Council's commitment to ensuring fair outcomes for all Tucsonans. I'm confident Laurice will help our city improve the delivery of service by identifying areas where bias and systematic inequality are getting in the way of access to quality parks, roads, and services." Laurice brings more than 11 years of experience working with national leaders to define best practices around the understanding and application of equity, social justice, and accessibility in local government. Prior to being hired by the City of Tucson, Laurice served as the inaugural Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager for the City of Plymouth, Minnesota. Her previous experience includes work as Project Coordinator for the City of Minneapolis, Division of Race and Equity for 6 years. Walker currently serves as an Equity Officer with International, in the past, City-County Management Association. Her educational studies are in industrial and organizational psychology and numerous professional certifications in diversity management, project management, and corporate training. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ms. Laurice Walker. Thank you.
How are you guys? Good. Victor, it's truly an honor to be invited to share space and share conversations about the importance of advancing equity. Oftentimes, when I talk about this work, I become vulnerable because often to lead this work and to be effective, a lot of the folks actually, you might live those experiences. And that's my philosophy of doing this work. In order to get to organizational and institutional change, we have to really address individual behavior change. And that's where my organizational psychology background comes in, understanding how individuals operate, how they show up in spaces. As we talk about these complex conversations that's been going on for decades, as you all know, as leaders who have been in the movement of the political realm and fighting and activating the rights for those to be able to vote and to have access and to have resources. I am not native to Tucson. I am from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I grew up in a western suburb outside of the Twin Cities called Hopkins, Minnesota. You know, just a kid growing up in the early 90s, you know, wanting to go outside, ride my bike, play with my friends. The kids these days don't do that. If you have kids, children, grandkids, any young folks around you, you know they're on those devices and it's much worse than it is. They'll call me on the cell phone and we're in the room next to each other. I'm like, can you just talk to me? I don't even know if they know what that is. But you know, I knew that I was always different growing up. I knew something about me was different, but I also knew something about me was special. I say that to say that I've always been told, oh, you're so resilient, oh, you're so resilient. And I never really understood what that meant until I really got to college. But growing up, you know, being the only young black gymnast at a state conference for gymnastics in the state of Minnesota in the early 2000s. Having my first African-American professor was in college. Having a teacher that looked like me. I share these things because I say that they're so powerful and they're so impactful we really get activated when we see someone who looks like us in spaces where we want to feel belong. And when we don't see people who look like us, it's very, very, very hard to feel included. It's very hard to be a part of the process. It's very hard to have access. My message today to you all is that not only is our democracy under attack, but so is equity. And when we talk about equity, I talk about it in the lens of making sure that people have access to the resources and the services that our local government and federal government has to offer. That's how I lead with equity in the city of Tucson. That's how I lead with equity in my personal and professional life. You all have great keys to the history of what it was like to be a part of this movement, of this organization, but you also have the great keys for the future. all the diversity, equity, inclusion positions that were started between 2018 and 2021, 75% of those jobs are eliminated today. Tennessee, DC, Texas, Iowa, Florida, in the last 4 months have eliminated diversity and inclusion offices, from higher education to local government. Just this year, in these last few months. And not only too far from home at the state, did we have a ballot to eliminate positions like mine and other higher education as well. So when we talk about the democracy being under attack, we're talking about humans. We're talking about people. We're talking about the very people that have been a part of the fabric of our country. And I know I can be on a soapbox and we could talk about it all day. My time is limited. But I want to let you all know that you do have the tools, you have the resources. But I think you have to understand the access and the privilege that you have at the table of being in this space and to have these conversations. Because the people that we need here, they're not in this room. So you're like, okay, Laurice, well, how do we get them here? Well, I think the first piece is we have to acknowledge the historical trauma, the historical harm that both our local policies and local government and state government and federal government has played on our underserved and marginalized communities. We want to bring to the people to the table. We want to say, come fight with us. Come be activated with us. But where were we for them? Are we offering them a seat today? And not just on the tail ends of George Floyd, because when you think about the numbers of those positions that was created, only 15% of DEI offices were created prior to George Floyd. 56% of those jobs created in organizations across the country was because of George Floyd. I was working at the city of Minneapolis during that time. I was a city employee, doing the same very thing that I'm doing here in Tucson, working for the Division of Race and Equity. And I want you to know that that was the moment that I realized that I needed to do something different and something more. I love public safety. I think they're my coworkers, they're our peers, they're here to help keep our community safe. But let me tell you, they didn't recognize who I was being on the other side of that line, even though I was a colleague of theirs. So when we talk about doing the right thing, yes, our intentions can be pure, but that doesn't mean that we're acting in a fair, just manner. We have to identify how we show up in spaces and how sometimes, historically, people of color don't feel safe to speak up about the things that they're experiencing because they have been shut down by people who don't look like them. We have to acknowledge that redlining was by design and not by accident. So when you talk about redistricting and you talk about the way that our wards are set up here in the city and you talk about our affluent neighborhoods, and then you talk about the other people on the other side of the highway that our government built that divided our historic barrios. We have to talk about that. And yes, we have to talk about it today in 2024. People think because it was that was so long ago, why are people still that? Because people are still affected. Home ownership, the largest gap in home ownership is between our white families and our black families. And that is not by accident. I want y'all to really, really just drive that home that we as an organization, we as an institution, we as a community body have been a part of these practices and these policies and these programs that have set our communities up to not advance at all. And we're looking at them and saying, why are you not joining the fight? I love what I do. I'm the youngest chief equity officer in the country. I don't say that much, but I'm trying to lean into it because imposter syndrome is very real. But I say that to say is because I knew that when I was a kid, I wanted to be a gymnast, I wanted to be a tennis player, and I wanted to be the president. I have done 2 of those 3 things thus far. People ask me, why do you want to be the president? Why? Why am I doing the work that I'm doing? Because I was a kid who was affected by the things and the systems that we see. To be 21 years old, to have my first teacher in my entire life be African American, I think is crazy. I went kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 10th grade, 12th grade, and didn't see someone in my institution to educate me and teach me. But we talk about why the prison to pipeline is so real. We have a duty. You all have a duty in this room to ensure that our community and our residents and our constituents and our voters have access through education, through resources. But I think taking a step back to listen to those lived stories, now don't go to ask all your friends of color, tell me about your story, because we will cause harm. But what I am saying is that you invite them to the table the next time you're going to a board meeting. You say, come along. I know it might not have been easy to see yourself reflected in our organization or reflected in the systems and the policies that we have, but let me tell you, we have a seat for you that we want you to take advantage of. We have to create room. We have to make way. And I know that we all can do it together. Not only, like I said earlier, about our democracy, but again, our humanness. We thought that this was a 1619 concern and situation, but unfortunately it's not, because it still showed up in 2018. It still showed up in 2019. It still showed up in 2020. It still showed up in 2021. It still showed up in 2022, 2023, and still today in 2024. It is still showing up, the dehumanization of our communities and of our Black and brown folks. It's still here. And there is still room to do something about it. But a lot of that is given the privilege and the power that you all have at the table to someone else so that they can show up and speak up. Tucson's a great community. I love it. I've been here for 2 years. I'm starting my 3rd year. And one thing I can genuinely say about the community is you are all open and you're so welcoming and you're so inviting. And I think now that we need to take it a step further to our local policies, our local government, our organizational practices and education as well. I think the education system here in Arizona and also Tucson has not been the prettiest. But you all at the table have the opportunity to do something about that. Create space. I ask that you walk away today knowing that my job and my leadership at the City of Tucson is purely about changing our systems and changing our policies. The first thing that I did when I joined the office at the City of Tucson, I implemented a budget analysis on how we're spending our money. I asked all of our departments at the city to tell me, what are you spending your money on and how are they impacting our underserved and marginalized communities? They were not a fan at first. They were like, well, where we spend our money? You're already doing the work. I wanted them to know that just because I showed up on the scene doesn't mean that you weren't already doing equity work. They were already doing the work. You were already delivering services that impact our underserved and marginalized communities. You were already doing public engagement, whether that's community forums, listening sessions, taking on callback virtual calls. You're already doing the work. You have the tools, you have the resources. I'm just asking the organization and the departments to shift their thinking about how they are doing the work. I implemented a departmental equity coordinator program. I asked for people across the City of Tucson that wasn't managers, supervisors, or directors to join a cohort for 12 months to learn and advance their skills about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the organization and each of the departments. We had 24 different representatives across the city. And we had 10 departments who presented a new department plan or strategy to impact equity, and the department directors supported it and implemented. We had 1,200 employees at the city take a racial equity impact assessment to assess how the organization is doing in advancing equity. I will be honest, there was some alarming results in that survey. But let me tell you, what that means is we have work to do. But it doesn't mean that the work can't be done. It just means that we need to take a step back and be strategic about how we do the work. What's on the horizon for the organization? I'm implementing a Foundations of Equity training. Again, as a psychologist by trade, we truly need to address our individual behavior change to get to organizational behavior change, which will get to systemic change. The Foundations of Equity certificate series is going through talking about LGBTQ+, talking about microaggressions, talking about generational differences in the workplace. It's talking about accessibility and access. We have to give our employees the tools and resources and a foundation to understand what's the buy-in, what is the stake for me. We may not have been personally affected by some of the huge impacts we've seen in our local policies, but I bet you might call somebody and you know who has. I want to leave you with the statement and the fact that it's going to take many generations to undo what has happened. But please don't be discouraged by me saying that it's going to take many generations. I might not see it, but I hope that the future generations are able to see the work that you're putting in, the work that I'm putting in. But the collective work of our community and standing up against what's right, standing up against the attack on our women. I can tell you it's actually very difficult sometimes to come to work, to be a woman, to be a millennial, someone who's 30, and to be a woman of color. Because every day I wake up, I'm still going to be black. It ain't going to change. I'm going to still be a woman. That's not going to change. But society is making it so hard. So hard. So hard. But it doesn't have to be. And that's why we're all here. To pave the way, to make sure that people have access to the tools, access to the resources, access to the right to vote. Now they're trying to implement laws where you have to have an ID that says that you was a U.S. citizen or where you was born. They're making it hard. Harder and harder in 2024. We have come a long way, but we have a lot of work to do. And I appreciate all of you. And I want to make sure that I'm on time. I will be here for lunch if there's any other questions that you might have about the work that I've done, about my personal story, my personal life. But I appreciate you all and continue to call on our young folks who are out here doing the work because some of them are getting tired. They're getting tired. I'm not tired yet, but some of my friends are. I hope so. I appreciate you. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions. That was 16 minutes. Yes.
So I was up in Phoenix yesterday morning. Katie Hobbs was presenting a multi-million-dollar award to the community colleges in our state. And so there are 10 community college systems, and 7 of the president's CEOs are men, and 3 of them are women. And I took a picture because I wanted to share it with our chancellor. The men were standing in a circle facing each other before the governor arrived, and the 3 women were outside the circle. And I think, not that anything bad happened, right? It wasn't a bad thing, but it's seeing those sights and being aware that if everybody, like you said, if everybody isn't at the table, if everybody isn't included in even the informal discussions, who knows what we all lose? And so I called up the chancellor when I got home later in the afternoon, and I said, I really am not criticizing. I just want us to be aware when these kind of things happen. And, get in there, lady. I said, you're short, right? Just move in there underneath their arms and get in the circle, get in the conversation. And I said, you're doing it for you right now, for your job, but you're also paving the way for you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for saying that, because it reminded me to let you know that equity is not just our Black and brown folks' fight. It's all of our fights. We're all affected by the systems and systemic racism. So thank you. Yes, back here.
Yes, thank you for being here. I am also a woman of color.
Yes.
Short. And Asians don't raisins, so I look like I was 15 until I was 40.
Come on
so
now.
Nobody had paid attention to me. And they would say, stand up, Leslie, and I would say, I am standing up. So, I keep standing up. So I love your message. Get in there, elbow your way in. They have to notice you. Somebody in that crowd will notice you, trust me. I've seen it happen, and it took a lot of courage for me to start out like that, because I wasn't raised like that. All of us are of an age where, let's see, you're not supposed to say anything. What was that saying? Seen but not heard. Oh yeah, Asian families especially.
Yeah.
So, getting up there and speaking, or getting up there and just forcing people to say hello to you. That is a great effort. Trust me, you have to be very brave to do that. And I'm sure many of you have been in that same position. So thank you for representing all of us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, there's one over here, two over here. The price is right. I'm just kidding.
I want to say that. Anyway, I just want to say how much I enjoyed your speech. It was outstanding. But in this day and age, I also want people to be aware that a lot of Jewish people are undergoing hateful things, and we need to speak up for them also.
Absolutely.
It's sometimes harder to see who is Jewish, depending if they're Ashkenazi or Sephardic, but we have to keep them close to us and make sure that they're safe also.
Yes, absolutely. It seems like every part of our being is under attack today. There's one right here, then we'll come here.
The states and the District of Columbia that you mentioned have eliminated their equity offices. What's the common thread? What are they afraid of?
Well, I can't speak for what they're afraid of, but what I can tell you is the average tenure for someone doing my job has been 18 months. And that was post George Floyd, and before that it was 3 years in a C-suite organization. The quickest among any other C-suite position in most of our large Fortune 500 companies. The biggest factor has been, and I can speak to what I've seen in Minneapolis and what I've seen in other cities and my colleagues across the country, is that oftentimes when we jump off on advancing equity or we have this idea, there's a lack of clarity of what this means to the organization. And if the organization isn't clear about their mission and why they're embarking on DEI, it will fail. Because you have to understand why you're doing the work, what you're going to do about the work, and how you're going to sustain the work. And if those three dots are not connected, the work is not going to be there. And I think that was just, in short, was the biggest factor, was there was a lack of clarity of direction and commitment among organizations to support individuals in those positions. And oftentimes, I will say this too, I will acknowledge this, a lot of people don't know how to support people like me in these roles. So I can say that I probably survived in Minneapolis for 7 years because I had the support, we had the leadership, we had the team, and I'm still here in Tucson coming upon my 3rd year because I had my own clarity and my own destiny, but not everybody was blessed with that opportunity to do the work. But oftentimes, even you as an organization, you have a DEI committee, make sure your purpose is clear as to why you are talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility for the League of Women Voters in Tucson. Thank you.
Just a comment.
comment from
Yes.
a woman who has had a 50-year career in a man's field, physics and mathematics. Okay. Can you hear now? Closer. All right. I had a 50-year career in physics and mathematics, defense work, and academic work. And when you go into a meeting and you're the only woman in a room of 50, not 5, 50 men, or you go into a defense review board and everybody in uniform there is male, not necessarily white, but male. Okay. It is a very challenging activity.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go into a performance review and you are being dissed because you have not shown sufficient respect to your male colleagues who don't know what the hell they're talking about, and you try and be very polite about it, and then when you prove to them, you really need to fix this, or else customer, and you know who customer is if you do defense work, is going to find out about it. You really need to fix it. And then they say you need to move on to the next program because you told them the truth. And then you find out the next year that they found out that it was not only misfeasance, but an occasionally malfeasance. I was on one program that lost every single female technical employee that they had for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they drove them off. And I will shut up.
No, I'm you. We are here with you. Thank you.
I'm wondering what the removal of the affirmative action by the Supreme Court bill did or to affect the DEI thing you were talking about.
Yes, I don't know a whole lot about the higher education, but I do see that now a lot of organizations and jobs in the market are also kind of leaning that way. We're like, okay, we don't need to check the box or look at applicants and build up our diverse workforce. I think that has become a challenge. Again, it already was a challenge to make sure that our workforces were diverse, but now that's becoming a barrier because, well, if this affirmative action is going away and this is not a thing from the Supreme Court, why should we be caring about it in our organizations? And I think that that's still the biggest piece when these positions still do exist in organizations, is to making sure that our workforce is diverse and reflective of the community that we're serving.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There's 2 back here.
Okay, somebody mentioned about how to do it. I just want to give you a little personal thing that I did. Last night, I volunteered in the Sunnyside School District to come and help check in the guests. Now, this program honored high school graduates who have been awarded scholarships to attend their different colleges. Mm-hmm. And there were 51 Hispanic students. And at one point, I felt I don't speak Spanish except a couple of words. And I had trouble with some of the pronunciations of the people, not only the kids, but the parents who came to check in at the table. And but I did it because Janice puts out announcements about doing some volunteer work. Mm-hmm. Well, being African American, that's a largely Spanish community. And I said, I'll do it because I want them to see, as a member of the League of Women Voters, because it's part of what we do. Mm-hmm. I had a wonderful time. The food was Hispanic or Mexican food, which I eat and cook myself, but I really enjoyed it. And everybody was very friendly, very civil, very nice. And the thing about the men thing, I'm going to take that advice, and when I'm at places where there are men of importance or significant, I'm going to go up and say hi. I'm who? And actually, I did that last night, and I just felt, well, you know what? Like you, I'm short, woman, but I figured do it.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of us are up there in age, definitely I am, but I'm urging if you or you have friends or family members who are able and have the time to volunteer to go out representing the league, what we stand for, not just voting, but DEI, to do it. Just be there. Absolutely. And go where they are and let them get to know you. I told them I'll do this again next year. It's an annual event to honor scholarships. And I just had a wonderful time.
Yes, thank you. There was one behind, right here.
Amy Cole. Thank you, Laurice, for your talk today. I'm curious about the structure of your job.
Yeah.
So I imagine you don't want to be policing, you're more influencing, but I'm more curious just about how you go about your day-to-day.
Yes, so I basically work as an internal consultant for the organization. So my office reports to the city manager, Mr. Ortega. We are housed in the city manager's office, and I think that's a powerful thing, because that means that my work touches every department across the city of Tucson. I am a part of the executive leadership team with my other colleagues, public safety, water, park and recs, all of those departments. I have several individuals that work for me. I have a data manager who works on using demographic data to tell the story and the narrative on how our organizational policies and best practices have impacts on our underserved and marginalized communities. I also have a position for someone who does our internal and external public engagement pieces, really building our staff capacity to think about advancing equity. So those learnings, those trainings, the lunch and learn informal opportunities, and a book club to really build their skill set. And then the public engagement piece, we touch board and commissions. We speak to public groups like this one of yourself, and really thinking about what are those cross-jurisdictional partnerships that we can have with the county and the state, but then also our larger partners across the country. And then the other piece of that is having a policy person. So really making sure that we are going back, looking at our city ADs, looking at our city's policies, whether it's in the fire department or it's in our recorder's office, making sure that is there language that's not inclusive? Are we misusing our gender pronouns? How do we make that more gender neutral? Looking at how some of those smaller effects have actually big impacts on our organization. Are we supporting individuals transitioning their gender identity in the workplace? Are we looking at ADA accessibility? We're a little bit behind. We're working on it. Are we translating things, right? Yes, we are a large Hispanic Latino community, but we don't automatically translate our documents in Spanish, which I was actually very surprised. But it's costly, it's expensive, and we need to do better as an organization, but I think as a community and as a society to really think about how we do that. But that's really the big structure of our work. And then I would just say 3 big policy programs that I'm responsible for, that I've championed, is the equity budget analysis. So again, looking at how we spend our money, an equity action plan for the entire city. So how are we addressing different policies, whether it's our recruitment and demographics of our workforce, it's procurement, how we spending our money, who we're spending our money with, are we investing back locally into our community, and then looking at our community safety programs and looking at our alternative response models and how we're engaging the community in our decisions as an organization. Thank you all, and I'll be here until 12. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurice. We all benefited from having you here today.